All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Aftershow with me, General, and Breaker here. We're going to be discussing the movie Fight Club. I think it's probably, if not the most biggest favorite movie, at least one of my most biggest favorite movies of all time. Uh, yeah, we will just hop into it. Breaker, you and I, we both watched this film today, actually, just a few hours ago. This is probably like the 15th time that I've seen this goddamn film. You said that this was your second?
Years ago, I probably couldn't count the number of times I've seen it because it used to come on TNT. Um, that was probably 5 years ago, and I didn't rewatch it until literally today. So,
Okay. I think that this movie, it has a lot of depth and complexity to it, and I think that there's a number of ways that you can interpret it, but I think that the way that I interpret this movie is best because that's the way that I interpret the movie, and so of course it's best. Uh, but anyway, the film opens at the very beginning, and this movie came out in 1999, mind you. And honestly, to this day, the CGI in this movie, it stands up relatively well. Like, I understand it looks a little bit dated, but this was back during the time when they they only used CGI when they had to, and they actually took some time to make sure that the CGI didn't look like shit. Whereas I think in a lot of movies that came after this, especially like in the early to mid 2000s, they just used CGI willy nilly and like all over the place just because it was cheaper, maybe. And a lot of those things ended up looking like absolute shit, especially like 15 years later. Um, did you notice that at all, Breaker?
when you said the use of CGI, I was thinking to myself, like, wait a minute, this is. And then I remembered there is a CGI scene in this movie where he's imagining, like, sometimes I wish for one of the wings to fall off or another plane to crash into this one, anything. And then he imagines the plane, like another plane, like T-boning the plane and cutting it in two. That's the only CGI scene that I could think of off the top of my head. It's like, yeah, that for 1999, that, like, special effects action scene, I guess you could call it, is I think it stands out in this movie because you think I remember action movies that were really CGI heavy. Like, you remember that really shitty T-Rex Godzilla 2000 or what the fuck ever it was, where that CGI was janky as fuck.
Well, so there's actually a couple other instances of CGI in this film. So, for instance, when he goes into the cave and he finds his power animal, there's a CGI penguin, if you'll remember that. Um, and in the beginning scene, at the very beginning of the movie, like before anything is even started, it actually starts at an axon dendrite junction, a synapse. It starts at a synapse.
Oh yeah, it starts in a brain basically, and it zooms out to where it's like a sweat gland on his head, and it's like, yeah, I remember that.
Right. And so, like, I know that it hasn't aged perfectly, but I think that for 1999, and again, this was the same year that The Matrix came out. I think that honestly, the use of CGI at this point in time was absolutely brilliant. Of course, we're talking about a 23-year-old movie, but in my personal opinion, an absolutely brilliant movie. So to start with, the film opens up with a synapse. It's a junction between an axon and a dendrite. And then we move outwards from like this kind of like a neural network kind of thing, out from a sweat gland and into the perspective of the gun being held in the narrator's mouth. Now, we never actually know the name of the narrator in this movie. It's never told to us. He is just the narrator throughout the entire film. They are the narrator. He's on top of a building, and they're waiting for the bombs to go off, and that's all we know. And then the narrator goes, "Okay, hold on, back up. Let me tell the story from another place." And so we back up, and this is kind of where the film actually begins. So far up until this point, Breaker, what were you thinking?
The immediate impression I got was that this is setting us up in no uncertain terms to communicate to us that the entire movie that we see unfold from that point is brain activity. Or in other words, the imagined experience of this individual. This is like the ultimate unreliable narrator. So unreliable that at no point do they even consider, even at other points in the movie where they look directly into the camera and break the fourth wall and talk to audience directly. Nowhere else is it brought up. It's like, what exactly is my name? Like you just said, that never comes up. Even though this is a fourth wall breaking, very meta movie, the actual narrator doesn't even take the time during these fourth wall breaks to indicate his own identity. And I think that's very telling, and it's communicating to us that this is just either a blank slate human that all of us are supposed to identify with, like a archetypal everyman, or this movie is some type of like meta-analysis of fictional storytelling archetypes themselves.
So I disagree with you. I think that the narrator is actually reliable in this film. I do believe that. Like, I don't think that this is all just his imagination and like, oh, he's not reliable, and like maybe this is all like a dream, or he's in a coma, or he's in a psych ward. I don't think that that's true. I really don't. I think that this is a story that is being told by a guy. The guy appears to be incredibly honest throughout the entire film. And I can go into that a bit, but he seems to be a very honest guy. It's just that his brain is fucking with him. So he doesn't. And spoiler alert, by the way, 100%, we're getting into all of the spoilers of this movie. So if you want to watch it yourself, please go watch it first, and then come back to this. But
yeah, this is a complete movie analysis. There will be spoilers. That kind of goes without saying, like all of our shit.
But the thing is that I think that the narrator is actually reliable. It's just that he's being fucked with by Tyler Durden. And I think that there's a difference. It's not that he's an unreliable narrator. It's not that he himself is crazy. It's that there is another entity in his head that is fucking with him. And whether this entity is malicious or benevolent or somewhere in between, I mean, that's up to debate. But I think that actually, I think that there is reliability from the narrator. I don't think that this film is meant to be just like, oh, it was all a dream, he was in a coma, he was in a psych ward, blah, blah, blah.
There is another point in the movie that's, and you would probably remember this better than I do, but there is like a passing throwaway line, blink and you'll miss it moment, where one of the characters does say to him, it's like, aren't you just dreaming all of this on the bed of some psych ward, or some line like that, where they even bring up, like, explicitly in the movie, like, aren't you just a crazy guy having a delusion on a bed somewhere in a psych ward?
I can't remember that at all. Actually, I've seen this movie a whole bunch of times. I can't remember that line at all.
Yeah, I remember that. I forget which character it was, though. It might have been Tyler Durden fucking with him, which would go along with your analysis. Is like Tyler Durden is the ever-present foil, but from my perspective, what Tyler Durden represents is that one audience member. Now, I've done this with many movies myself, where you kind of like project yourself and insert yourself into a movie, and you look at the movie's protagonist like, what a pussy. It's like, he should have done that. It's like, don't go down that hallway, you idiot. To me, Tyler Durden kind of represents a... Tyler Durden is literally the extremely critical and skeptical audience member caricaturized as a character in this movie that's always like fucking with protagonist motivations and saying like, I could have done that better, until like Tyler Durden himself like merges with the actual movie to the point where the narrative becomes so hopelessly fucked up and convoluted that the actual movie fights back against him and tries to reverse the course of this.
But the movie loses, does it not? Because at the end of the film, Tyler Durden wins. He knocks down all of the banking towers. Not to get like too ahead of things, but this is something that I loved about the film. Tyler Durden is a possibly insane anarchist. More specifically, an Anarcho-Primitivist. And he wants to blow up a whole bunch of buildings. And then, at the end of the film, even though Tyler Durden dies, he blows up those buildings. And he gets precisely what he wanted. And I think that I mean, oh my god, we're getting right to the end. But when you look at the way that the character actually behaves at the very end of the film, it seems as though both the narrator and Tyler Durden have died from the conflict, and that they've become one, because the character has a lot of the strength and charisma. Like in like, this is the very last scene, like the past like the last like 2 minutes, but he has the strength and charisma of the Tyler Durden figure, but also the warmth of the narrator. And I think that they become synergized into like the same person. And then all of the diabolical plans that Tyler Durden had cooked up, they all happen. And then it plays Where Is My Mind by the Pixies. And I believe that this is essentially the best movie ending that really exists. Because in most movie endings, the villain is foiled, and the good guy, he wins the day, and all the plans of the villain, they're washed away, and everything is pleasant. But no, this movie doesn't do that. They knock down the fucking towers. The villain actually gets to have his plan be made, and to a certain extent, the villain, the antagonist, Tyler Durden, actually wins in the end. And that's a thing that too many fucking movies are too scared to do, to have the villain win. Well, you know what, man? In like 99.9% of movies, the protagonist wins. But that's boring, man. Like, I'm actually interested in movies where the protagonist loses, where the antagonist wins. That's a much more interesting film, in my opinion. And also, the thing is that they didn't set Tyler Durden up to be the guy who was wrong. They set Tyler Durden up to be the guy who had just a different perspective from the rest of the consumerist culture that exists within the film. He's a different guy. He's not inherently an evil guy. He's weird. He's strange. He's different. But he's not evil. And at the end of the day, he wins. And I think that, like, again, we're shooting right to the end here, but god damn, like the ending, man, that's a powerful ending for a movie. And of course, that would never have been allowed on screens after 2001, right? That could only have existed prior to 2001, that they knocked down the towers. But it came out in 1999, and it was fucking beautiful.
Oh, it predicted another thing that predicts 9/11. Ooh, but anyway, we're gonna have to go back to that ending later on, because the more I think about that, the more weirdly subversive that becomes. But okay, I think a modern audience that's going to be listening to this video is probably going to be mostly video gamers, epic video games, and most people listening to this have probably heard of a gaming franchise called Grand Theft Auto. To me, Tyler Durden has the vibe of a player character being controlled by someone playing like a video game, where you go into Grand Theft Auto, you jump in front of cars, you drive on the wrong side of the road, you randomly start fights and you don't give a shit. You shoot people, you threaten people with guns just because you can, and damn the consequences, you literally don't give a fuck.
I think that Tyler Durden. Okay, all right. Let's start from the beginning. Okay, let's start from the beginning. So
and Tyler Durden is ever present. If you remember, he even describes in his profession where he's like the movie editor and he splices the porn. And I saw that final clip at the ending where the cock pops on the screen. That was funny as hell.
Did you notice that before we were introduced to Tyler Durden in the film, that he's actually spliced into
yes, he's a
frames?
cigarette burn. He's literally a cigarette burn. He is literally the margin. He is literally the in-between point of two different meta narratives that coalesce together. He is embedded in the very architecture of the movie itself.
Exactly. Yes, he's spliced into the frames of the movie. Yeah, which I think is a brilliant touch, because it's like Tyler Durden was also splicing frames of cock into certain other movies. But so let's take it back to the original scene. So Tyler Durden is holding a gun to the narrator's mouth, and the narrator goes, let me describe how this all started. He starts with he's in the Remaining Men Together group, and his face is plastered into Bob with bitch tits. Then he goes, hold on, let me rewind a little bit further, which kind of belays like the jumbled nature of the narrator's mind, that he isn't exactly sure how to even tell the story. So he says, let's roll it back a bit, and then he goes, with insomnia, everything is a copy of a copy of a copy.
And then Tyler Durden pops up in a cigarette burn.
And he says, when man makes it to the stars, you'll have the Microsoft Galaxy, the Starbucks Nebula. This is the beginning of the anti-consumerist, the anti-culture nature of the narrator. Like, he has insomnia, but even then he's saying, in a very I guess cynical take, he's saying, when mankind makes it to the stars, they'll have Microsoft Galaxy and Starbucks Nebula. And what he's recognizing is that there is something evil in the modern day, in whatever the fuck this odd government corporate. I mean, I'm inserting some of my opinions here, but I think that what he's recognizing is that whatever this weird like fucking government corporate thing that's existing, it's inherently unhuman. There's an anti-humanness to making it the fucking Microsoft Galaxy. There's something unhuman to this. And I think that what the narrator is really trying to get to is something that is just fucking human. I think that that's what he cares about. Uh, he talks about his apartment and how he has the IKEA nesting instinct, where he buys that cute little yin yang table and the little glass plates with little imperfections that prove that they were made by the sweatshop labor of indigenous working children from whatever fucking random nation. These are all things that like these are things that take away from being a genuine human. Like the fact that you just order all your furniture online and you're just a perfect little consumer that fits within this perfect little pod and you work this perfect little job and you get all this perfect little furniture. All of this is not, it's not a human thing. This is you being basically a cog in the wheel. And it's not human, because humans are not meant to live like this. We're not meant to live in pods and just be perfect little entities for all time. Humans are rebellious. Humans do have grudges. Humans have emotions. Humans have strife. Humans get angry. Humans get upset. Humans sometimes want to fucking rage because they are people. They are not part of this fucking consumeristic goddamn assembly line. They are people. They have emotions, and sometimes they get angry. Okay, and I want to. That's all. That's what I want to say about that. Sometimes humans get angry.
When you have insomnia, everything is a copy of a copy of a copy.
Exactly.
And then it goes into the anti-consumerism immediately after that. It's like, oh,
no. We're not there yet. We're not there yet, because then it goes back to the narrator being in the remaining men together group, and he meets Bob. Right now, Bob is a man with bitch tits. Now here's the thing, right? Bob was focused on self-improvement. He wanted to become the ideal male. He had a chest expansion program, and he took a whole bunch of fucking horse tranquilizers to try to make himself like the biggest bodybuilder, to try to make himself the best consumerist male that was just the best at all the things with the biggest muscles, and he could be the best at all the consumerism. But then he ended up with bitch tits, because actually, that pursuit is hollow. That pursuit grinds you down. At a later point in the film, when the narrator and Tyler Durden are talking, they look at a Calvin Klein model, like a man, like an underwear model man for Calvin Klein, and they point at him and they go, "Oh, is that what a man is?" And then I believe Tyler Durden goes, he goes, self-improvement is masturbation. Now self-destruction, right? Now that actually harkens back to Bob. Bob was trying to do self-improvement, but it ultimately ended up being hollow, and he ended up with bitch tits and probably losing a testicle as a result of this, due to cancer. Now, that was him trying to do self-improvement under this kind of like consumerist ideology. But what actually, I mean, I guess Bob ends up dying at the end. But Bob was much happier, at least for a brief time, not engaging in self improvement, but actually engaging in what Fight Club would call self-destruction, which I'm not even sure is actually self-destruction. I think it's the destruction of the part of you that is the consumerist, the consumer, as opposed to like just complete and total self-destruction. It's not about destroying yourself. It's about rejecting the consumerist model, right? And I think that there's something there, man. And this is not pro-communist, by the way. This is absolutely not a fucking pro-communist stance, because my perception of this film is that this is specifically uh, an anarcho-primitivist film. I think that it is specifically advocating for anarcho-primitivism, which is an ideology that I may or may not support a little bit. But yeah. Anyway, Breaker, do you have any thoughts about everything that I just said, or the film in general?
His name is Robert Paulson. In Operation Mayhem, those that have died do have names.
His name is Robert Paulson. His name is Robert Paulson. His name is Robert Paulson.
That kind of makes me think. It's like I think there's a lot of like truth behind how you were describing the whole Bob with the bitch tits tragic character arc there. Like, as far as he was concerned, he was technically doing everything right, but got a really shitty result out of it. And it sets him down this road of like literally going to these therapy sessions and having cry outs and be like, oh no. But if you remember, our narrator, he's going to all these different therapy sessions just because he has nothing better to do. Like,
That's
he doesn't have
true.
testicular cancer.
It's not that he has nothing better to do. He could do lots and lots of other different things. There's a reason why he's going to specifically these groups. It's because losing all hope is freedom. And what that means, I think that what he really means by that is that we live in this society that always gives you hope. It's always telling you, bro, you know what, if you just try a little bit harder, if you're just a slightly better cog in the machine, then I'm sure that you'll make it. I'm sure that you'll fucking make it out of the machine, that you'll you know, something great will happen for you. You'll become a rock star, sure. But no, that's not what happens. The better of a cog you are in the machine, the more of a cog you become in the machine, because that's where you're valued at. If you're a really good cog, then that's where people are going to want to fucking have you be. So when the narrator says losing all hope is freedom, what he's meaning is that he's losing hope in, I think, what the civilization is presenting for him. He's losing hope in that. He's saying, you know what, I would fucking rather die than accept this fucking lifestyle or life that society is presenting towards me. I'm able to sleep better if I can think that, like, maybe, like, just for a second I was gonna die and then, like, oh, I got resurrected. Because the narrator also said that. He said every night I die, and then after every meeting I'm resurrected, right? He wants to feel something that is genuine. He wants to feel something real. And the civilization is not giving that to him. The civilization that he's operating under is corrupted. It's unhuman. And he can't sleep because of the issues with this civilization. And you can see that in his profile, right? In his character at the beginning of the film, you can see why it is that Tyler Durden became a thing. Because he himself, as the narrator, as his own individual character, he was disgusted with the society that he was living under. He was a slave to it. He wasn't rebelling against it, but you could tell that he was disgusted by it. He couldn't sleep. He had to join these fucking groups to hang out with people that had testicular cancer to try to feel better about himself. Tyler Durden was an extension of his own mind, which was a rejection of the civilization that he was living under. I believe that's what was happening. That's my analysis.
Also, I get the sensation from why he wanted to go to all the different therapy groups. And he even explicitly makes this clear at a later point in the movie where he says to the female character, when we get into her, I go to these groups so I can have like experience a sincere negative emotion and actually cry. And I can't do that if there's another faker around.
Oh, yeah, that's when he was talking to Marla Singer. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So the only sincere engagement he can find in the in this hyper consumerist, hyper modern world is the one thing that the consumerist, hyper modern, bright, shiny people, if you remember that song by REM, aren't constantly shoving down your throat is like legitimate grief and sadness. And the only place he can find that is in these support groups where people are literally, utterly, and totally at the end of their rope and they're literally emotional wrecks and they sincerely cry with how tragic their fucking life is. That's the only place where he can find sincere emotion. All the other positive emotions have this bright, shiny veneer of spit and polished consumerism about them where they want you to feel good so you buy shit. It's like, I don't want to feel good and buy shit. Like, there's even commercials that'll make you feel bad for not buying shit. I don't want this fake good, fake bad. I want actual human experience. And the best place I can, the most accessible place I can get that is literally supreme tragedy of human existence at these places where these people are literally dying of cancer or have irreversible medical conditions. They're tragic figures. Tragedy is his hope.
That's exactly right. You fucking nailed it. And what you'll notice is that later on in the film, when he gets into Fight Club, he completely abandons all of these workshops that he was previously in. It's because he has actually found his own escape from civilization. But the thing about this one is that it is both destructive and constructive. Whereas the groups that he was going to previously are completely destructive. They're just things are sad, things suck. And he had to find shelter in those because he completely rejects the rest of the consumerist culture. And so he had to find shelter in that. But then he was actually able to make something that is still destructive, but it is also constructive. It's actually very constructive. It gives him a purpose to life. He later says in the film, Fight Club became the reason to cut your hair and to chisel your nails or whatever. Like, that became a constructive entity that he could actually build something upon after he rejected civilization. This was like the new rock that he could build something on. So there's that. We go on. Losing all hope is freedom. That's the whole point of that, right? Like, losing hope in it's not just losing all hope in yourself. It's losing hope in the civilization, in what the civilization expects from you. That is the losing all hope, and that is what freedom is. Let me see here. When he confronts Marla Singer, at the group, they have a short dialogue, and they go, when people think you're dying, they really listen to you instead of waiting for their turn to speak. And I think that is actually a really powerful quote from the film.
In a weird sort of way, he kind of has to rediscover what actual hope really is. Like, he has to sink into this underworld of depths of the human experience until he reaches this point where he finds the necessary, legendary weaponry, in this case symbolized by getting into Fight Club and starting these fights, which is kind of granted to him, access to him by Tyler Durden, which is the ultimate shapeshifter. It's literally himself in an alternative guise. So we have the Jungian hero's journey buckle.
So it's actually interesting that you should say that, because actually later on in the film, Tyler critiques the narrator and says, at least Marla is trying to hit rock bottom. What you have is false enlightenment, right? And so this is another one of those things where it's like, okay, if you look at it on the surface, like, oh, they're talking about enlightenment. Maybe this film is inherently like a Buddhist movie. And I can 100% understand how some people may think that this is a film that has to do with Buddhism. I don't think it does. I think that what Tyler is expressing here is that in order to actually exit the premise of the civilization, you have to hit rock bottom. You have to fundamentally not care about what the civilization is doing. I think that later in the film, let me just check my notes here. You have to reject the basic assumptions of civilization. That's what Tyler Durden says. You have to reject the basic assumptions of civilization. What Tyler is advocating for is not actually a Buddhist take. What he's saying is that you have to hit rock bottom in order to actually escape what civilization has done to you. You have been brought up within civilization for your entire life. You've been bred and trained to be a consumer for the last 30 years or whatever. And how do you escape from that? Well, you have to give up everything that civilization has given to you. Because also, civilization, I think in this aspect, civilization is a bit like a god, right? And it was also during this movie that Tyler Durden said, he said you have to consider the fact that if God is, sorry, I wrote it down here. If our fathers were our models for God, he says our fathers were our models for God. If our fathers bailed, what does that tell you about God? Right? So the thing is that there's a connection between the God and the Father in this movie. Now, I think that I'm not actually certain that he's talking about God as in the Christian aspect of God. I think that he might be talking about God as in what the civilization is. The civilization is the God, and the Father is the representation of the civilization that they were born from. And when their father abandons them, what does that say about civilization? And so when they when they're talking, I think that basically whenever they're talking about any aspect of God in this film, they're really referring to what the civilization is. And the civilization has abandoned them. Later on in the film, they go. Tyler Durden has this very well-known speech where he goes, we were all told that we were going to be rock stars and astronauts or whatever, but that's not true, and we are upset. Our great war is a spiritual war. Our Great Depression is our lives. This is all a direct attack against what the civilization is. And this is the civilization in 1999, mind you. I want to let everyone know that the culture, the consumerism, the civilization itself, it's gotten a lot more toxic since 1999. In fact, my God, Tyler Durden would be spinning in his grave if he saw the kind of shit that we were dealing with. But this film is not about Buddhism. This film specifically is anarcho-primitivism through and through. I wrote down many quotes here. I was actually prepared for a debate, but I'm just kind of churning through my quotes here because I guess yeah.
There's something that kind of brings this to a really fine point when he's sitting in the airplane across from this random woman. and he's talking about what exactly is it his job to do, and he's describing basically he's kind of like a consultant for this major auto company that
A
investigates.
times B equals C. No, A times B times C equals X. And if X is less than the price of a recall, we don't do one.
Exactly. So he's like describing in this very dispassionate and methodical, by the numbers way that. And keep in mind, before this, there's a scene where he's looking at the results of one of the car accidents that the type of job that he does actually causes, and everyone is just laughing like callously. It's like, oh, that father must have been a fat piece of shit, because you could still see his fat like cooked into the driver's seat of this burned out car, and they're just laughing about it.
Right. The whole thing is a critique about the modern day world. And by the way, even though this movie is 23 years old, I think that it might have even more impact in the modern day. I think it actually says more in 2022 than it even said in 1999.
Unfortunately, all that same shit is happening, but even more grossly, like, overblown ways these days than it even was back then. Like back then, keep in mind those seeds of like the car insurance, like shady car insurance people and all those types of things, that was kind of supposed to come across as a extremely hyperbolic parody, or a caricature rather, of that type of character to illustrate a narrative point in the movie. But people in the modern day and age watching back over that are going to think it's like, yeah, I kind of expect that. Like, now it's not even as statement making as it is just a bland statement of fact. As much of a bland, matter of fact statement as like, well, there it is, as the within the actual narrative of the movie itself is to the characters, the extreme over the top hyperbolic essential archetypal characters in this movie. What that scene represents is now just normal in the real world.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I guess we'll just the thing about this film is that it's hard to actually like. Okay, so 2 weeks ago we analyzed Spirited Away, right? That is a film that you can analyze scene by scene. This film, it's actually it's kind of a jumbled mess. You kind of which is apropos because the narrator is kind of himself a jumbled mess. So it's very difficult to analyze this movie scene by scene. You kind of have to do it as like, oh, this thing from like the first 5 minutes relates to this thing that's like an hour and 30 minutes in. But I want to say this. Okay, so the first thing is that when Tyler Durden and the narrator get into the car and they have that accident, and then the narrator is kind of like out of commission for potentially weeks, and he wakes up in the bed, he hears Tyler Durden saying to him, and I wrote this down, I quote, Tyler Durden says to the narrator, "In the world I see, you're stalking elk around the ruins of the Rockefeller Center. You'll wear leather clothing that will last you the rest of your life. You'll climb the rich, thick kudzu vines that wrap the Sears Tower. And when you look down, you'll see tiny figures pounding corn, laying strips of venison in the empty carpool lane of some abandoned superhighway." Now, Breaker, you listen to that quote from Tyler Durden, and you're going to tell me that the ultimate point of this movie is not anarcho-primitivism? You look at Project Mayhem, and how actually Project Mayhem has nothing to do with Buddhism. It's a hierarchical structure that specifically seeks to cause damage and destruction. This is not a movie about Buddhism. This is it's a political movie. It's a political movie, but it's expressing a political idea that is so fringe that most people are like, yeah, it kind of seems like Buddhism. But it's not. It's not Buddhism. I think it is anarcho-primitivism. I think that is what this movie is describing. And I am willing to fight you on this.
I mean, I probably wouldn't disagree that there is a very blatant and explicit anarcho-primitivist message coming from Tyler Durden. But also keep in mind that Tyler Durden is ultimately the antagonist of this movie.
No.
Even though he technically wins.
I'm not certain that Tyler Durden is actually the antagonist. In the traditional sense, he is the antagonist, but I'm not sure that he is genuinely the antagonist.
Yeah, like you say, it's a bit more. This movie isn't really straightforward and simplistic with its archetypes, because the way this movie is set up, it's the type of narrative that breaks the fourth wall and fucks with you, the observer of the art, and plays on the observer effect in a very effective way, and not a tropey. It's like, hey, Deadpool pointed at the camera and said, "You're welcome, America." Ah, clap, clap, clap. No, this is much more cerebral than that. The fact that this movie is constantly subverting with your expectations and fucking with you, the viewer of the movie, sort of leads me to believe that Tyler Durden isn't merely an antagonist. Tyler Durden is a representation of, because you're right, this movie is critiquing consumerism, and Tyler Durden seems to advocate for anarcho-primitivism. But what's actually happening here is Tyler Durden is sort of like a stand-in for, like I said before, all the people that go to movies like this and say, that protagonist is a pussy. I would have done it the different way. What the fuck are you doing? Like, Tyler Durden is that type of energy of a malcontent movie viewer characterized and inserted into the actual movie. So it's not so much fourth wall breaking as it's like another meta layer
I disagree.
on top of a fourth wall break.
No, I disagree. Tyler Durden is not the representation of the movie viewer, because if you'll remember, Tyler Durden also, at the beginning of the film, he had a side job as a projectionist at a movie theater, and he would splice...
Which is the ultimate movie viewer.
Right, but he would splice in cocks into family-friendly films, where
which he does in the actual movie.
Yes, he does. Right. Yes. The thing that he's doing is that I think that he is actually, in doing that, he's saying that, no, I am not the movie viewer. The viewer of the movie is a consumer. They paid to see the ticket, to see the movie in the film. Like, imagine watching this movie in the theaters when it first came out. I mean, I didn't. I was a little bit too young to actually be able to see this movie in theaters. But imagine that you're actually viewing this in the theater. Tyler Durden is not your fellow moviegoer. Tyler Durden is the guy that is the projectionist that is trying to fuck with you, because you're the consumer that paid to see the movie, and he's, even at that point, he's going, fuck you. Fuck you, stop being a consumer. I will fucking put dicks on this fucking screen. Go fuck yourself. There's a... There's no way that he is trying to be the expression of just the typical moviegoer. That's not what he's doing. It's actually the opposite.
I think...
He's trying to say fuck you to the moviegoer.
Yeah, I think you're actually right in this, and I was kind of I think your perspective is a little bit different than mine because usually I think we've all had this moments when we consume media and it's just like so formulaic and fucking cliche to the goddamn hilt where I, like modern movies that come out now I can predict with relative accuracy. It's like, okay, Doctor Strange, what's going to happen? The female is going to be the key to everything because strong women. Doctor Strange is somehow going to get cucked in his own fucking movie. Somebody is like men, especially straight white men, which Doctor Strange just so happened to be, are going to be represented poorly, even though their name is on the fucking movie. Somehow they're going to be criticized and mocked, which happens in the first 10 minutes of the fucking movie because he can't speak Spanish. So, especially nowadays, like this cynical view of movies, like probably a lot more people watching a thing like this will identify with this.
No, 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 no. It's
I
it's
kind of
not.
always
No,
had that.
no. It's not even that. The thing about Doctor Strange is that, uh, that is a formulaic plot. The thing about Disney films, especially the thing about Marvel films, is that it appeals to the lowest common denominator. You will notice that every single Marvel film has the same plot. You have a superhero. There is a bad thing that happens. The superhero has to go through some shit in order to be able to become strong enough to fight this overwhelming power. The superhero becomes strong enough, and then he wins because he's able to fight the overwhelming power. Name a single Marvel movie out of the past fucking 30 that have been made that doesn't abide by this exact same formulaic plot. This is the plot for the consumer. This is what Hollywood does to appeal to the lowest common denominator. Fight Club, I believe, is a specific rejection of this. It goes, you know what? No, we're all fucking adults here, and so like number one, be honest with us, and number two, I want to burn down your system, motherfucker. Fight me, and like that is the message that Fight Club conveys, and to a certain extent, honestly, I think that it was released before its time. I think that if this movie were to be newly released today, I think that it would make such a larger impact. Like it says more about our modern day world than it had anything to say about the world of the 1999. And I also want to say that the book Fight Club, written by Chuck Palahniuk, or however the fuck you pronounce his last name, I read that book twice. And I'm not talking about the book here because I genuinely believe that the movie was better than the book. I read a number of his other books; they were quite interesting, but I think that actually this is an instance where the movie was better than the book. I want to point that out to anyone that might be listening.
I would have to read the book to form an opinion on that, honestly, but I think most of what you said was right. The only thing I'll go over on the point you made specifically in that the element that you talked about that is a rejection of the paint by numbers, cliched, predictable moviegoer narrative, like I'm eating popcorn, hey, romantic comedy, make me feel romantically comedic. I don't fucking know. Which Fight Club is kind of like, until Tyler Durden becomes like a main part of the narrative, like halfway through the movie, this movie is kind of, it could have just easily been a kind of like romantic drama type thing with the female love interest and this guy, and they both go to these support groups that they don't. This shapes up like a romantic drama movie, like a fucking chick flick, until Tyler Durden explicitly inserts himself into the actual narrative structure of the movie and stops being the projectionist, like flickering and putting his own essence into the cigarette burns, like between changing of the reels, which he is actually doing in the movie until he explicitly shows up as a character. So Tyler Durden is always there in the background fucking with this on purpose. You're right about that. Until he's not. Until he actually actualizes and fully integrates into the actual movie seamlessly. Like when there's that one line when they say it's like a seamless transition that the audience didn't even notice.
Well, okay, I wanna say this. I think that the Fight Club does have a romance element to it. It's not a rom-com sort of romance.
It's a romantic
element.
drama. It's a drama.
It's not a romantic drama whatsoever, but it does have a romance element to it. And it's not a drama either. It's not. In fact, I think that it would be hard to place Fight Club into any sort of like pigeonholed kind of genre, right? Like Breaker. Do you think that Fight Club is more of a thriller or a romantic comedy? What do you think?
Honestly, it reminds me of some like Cannes Film Festival art house movie. Until, like I said, Tyler Durden enters it, like something like Lars and the Real Girl, but not that hyperbolic.
I think that the romantic plotline of Fight Club is better than literally every single rom-com that I've ever seen. And I haven't seen like a ton. I'm just saying, out of the ones that I've seen, I think that Fight Club does a better job with romance than any of the fucking rom-coms ever have. Because I think that it describes the complexities behind like the relationship between the narrator, Tyler, and Marla. In a very in an intimate way. Like you like during the film, if you watch it back and you already understand that actually the narrator and Tyler Durden are the same person, spoiler alert, you can actually see how it is that Marla is interacting with the character and how confused she is. And she clearly loves him, but she's so fucking confused by like what the fuck is up with you? I think like it's such a better fucking it's so much better than any fucking rom-com, right? Because the rom-com is the consumerist version of love, right? Like the rom-com is how you can distill love into something that is marketable for all consumers across the board to make it sellable to the lowest common denominator. Whereas I think that Fight Club actually does deal with like a notion of like genuine love between a man and a woman, and it's not something that you see in that many films, honestly. Like when Edward Norton is talking to Helena Bonham Carter in the food shop, and he's like, "Yo, I need you to fucking get out of the city for a minute, like fucking like you're not safe." And she goes, "I hate you," and he goes, "I accept that you hate me. You never have to see me again. But I like you. Like, I genuinely care about you, and I like you. And I am willing to say, okay, we will never see each other again, but for your own safety, you need to get the fuck out of the city. Here is money for a bus ticket." See, I think that is so much better than like any fucking rom-com that has ever existed. Like that is like genuine like human. It's like genuine human interaction. You know, like. Yeah.
It starts to make me think that she's actually sort of like a female version of Tyler Durden.
She absolutely is. Yeah, without a doubt. Because Tyler Durden himself says at least Marla is trying to hit rock bottom, whereas the narrator isn't. There is a connection between Tyler and Marla. They both are rejecting civilization. Marla Marla is not willing to go as far as Tyler is. But also, she's not willing to be as much of a simp as the narrator is. And so actually, the reason I think the reason why it is that she ultimately ends up really liking the narrator is that he's two people simultaneously. He's more and less extreme than she is, depending on who's in control at the moment. And I think I think that that's ultimately why Marla Singer falls for the protagonist. The protagonist actually is the narrator. Sorry, the narrator is they're meek and yet incredibly powerful. They are shy and yet incredibly confident.
Hmm. Let me think. Because I remember today when I finished this movie, I was thinking to myself, and I sent you a text in the DM if you remember, but I don't know. I think in my initial analysis, I wasn't going deep enough with it. I still have the ultimate impression of what's really going on here is that it's not so much as an actual guy just imagining all this in some type of psych ward somewhere, although sometimes he might be able to delude himself into thinking that, but that too is a delusion. This is such a paint by numbers working stiff that the only way he can self-actualize is to fully take on a 100% pure systemic contradiction to what he actually is in reality, which by the end of the movie ends up literally destroying his entire world, like when all the credit bureau buildings fall over.
No. At the end of the film, he attempts to shoot himself in the head. He misses, and he shoots himself through the cheek. He's bleeding profusely, but it doesn't kill him. This was his ability to fight both his father and God simultaneously. And by God, it's like the civilization, right? So in this final moment, the narrator has already rejected civilization, but he also sees the new civilization that Tyler Durden is trying to construct, and he rejects that. Now you'll notice that earlier on in the film, the narrator says, "Yeah, my dad, he had sex with my mom, he made me, and then he moved on to the next city, and every 6 years he would do the same thing. He would start a franchise and set up shop, do a family for 6 years, move on." Right? That was what the narrator said to Tyler Durden that his father did. And what did Tyler Durden do? It says specifically in the movie that Tyler Durden was setting up franchises all throughout the United States of mini fight clubs to create this entire fucking army that existed throughout the United States of fight club franchises that would all eventually graduate to do Project Mayhem. I think that what the narrator does when he shoots himself in the cheek is he says, "You know what? I let go." The narrator finally lets go because it's Tyler Durden that says, "Stop trying to control everything and just let go." So the narrator does genuinely let go. The narrator thinks that he's about to kill himself, but he accidentally shoots himself through the cheek. But he intended to kill himself. By doing so, I think that he unifies himself with Tyler Durden. So I think that he rejects what Tyler Durden has to say to a certain extent. But if you look at the demeanor of the narrator after he quote unquote shoots Tyler Durden, he shoots himself through the cheek. He's very like principled and almost like authoritarian with the other people of Project Mayhem. He's like, "Hey, yo, you leave the building. Hey, yo, you get some gauze." Completely unlike what the narrator was like before, where he was like very wary of the people from Project Mayhem. He wasn't willing to trust them. After he shoots himself through the cheek, he is trusting of them. He's like, "Yo, get some fucking gauze for me." But also, he seems to have a warmth to him that Tyler Durden didn't. And I think that at that moment, the two personalities have basically come back together. And they're like one person. And now this one person is very powerful. And then, at the end of the film, he goes, "Marla, you've met me at a very interesting point in my life." And then all of the buildings start to blow up. Because actually, Tyler Durden's plans went through. All of the buildings fall down. And then, "Where Is My Mind" by the Pixies plays in the background. And I cannot think of a more powerful ending for any film that has existed since then. Like, genuinely, I think that is, like, if there is a better ending to a film, I have not seen it since then. In the past 23 years, since that movie came out, I have not seen a better ending. It's a brilliant fucking ending. And it shows that what he's done is he's rejected civilization, but also he's rejected the cult-like power that Tyler Durden has, and he wants to pursue probably. I mean, my guess would be like a more pure anarcho primitivism. You know, if that would be my guess, but I'm biased. I don't know, but he's rejected both Tyler Durden and the civilization. He's been willing to let go. He's been willing to shoot himself in order to let go of all the bullshit. Letting go is the fundamental thing here. What you own ends up owning you. And he stopped owning anything. He says, "You know what? I will just be." And that sounds very Buddhist on its face. Of course, yeah, that sounds like a very Buddhist thing. But, once again, the anarcho-primitivist also doesn't want to own anything. They don't want to have anything to do with consumerist culture. So once again, I'm going to say, yeah, I think that fundamentally, I understand how it is that some people could see this movie with a yin-yang table, and the fact that, like, his fridge was flown out of the apartment because of the blast, and when you look at the fridge, the narrator goes, "Oh my god," and an apartment with no food but lots of condiments, right? I mean, that has a lot to say in and of itself, right? He has no food there, but he has a lot of condiments. It's
all form, no substance.
Exactly. Yeah. It's all fucking sparkly bedazzle, but there's no substance to it. Like, I can understand why it is that people would think that this might be a Buddhist film, but it's not. I think fundamentally, if you really look at it, and maybe I'm biased here, but I think it's an anarcho-primitivist film.
I think there's a very reconciliatory element to this movie. And the more I think about it, the more it keeps like nagging at the back of my mind. I know you're going to disagree with my particular take on this, but do you know when they first go to the dilapidated house, like the house that becomes the Fight Club house, the original Fight Club house, and he finds those like papers and they say like random things.
I am Jill's nipple. I am Jack's colon.
I get cancer and I kill Jack. You know what that sounds like to me? And remember, before this, there's like the therapy sessions And he'll use this like therapeutic language, like these affirmations, in narrating the movie as it goes on. Like, I abjects blind rage, and then he starts punching himself in front of his boss. Like, this keeps coming up over and over and over again.
Actually, it's
And
something that comes up even more in the book if you ever read it.
yeah, and this is starting to lead me in the direction that this really is a guy in a psych ward doing some type of Jungian psychotherapy. And he's
No,
integrating his shadow, which is Tyler Durden, and the archetypal like negative feminine, the anima, which is represented by the love interest.
no. I mean, look, you can take like this kind of like almost like postmodern view and go, oh, maybe it was all a dream. I mean, the movie never showed you that it was all a dream. In fact, I think that at the end of the film, it made a very specific decision to graphically show the buildings falling down, and then that
Okay,
was it. I
I'll tell
I
you
think
something about that.
I hold on. I think that there's a reason why they showed the buildings falling down. Back in 1999, it would have actually taken like a pretty decent special effects budget to make all of the buildings fall down in a realistic way, and I think they did a really good job. Um, they didn't show him wake up in a psych ward. At the end of the film, they showed something that was very concrete: buildings falling down. I don't believe that you can take that and go, hey, it was all a dream. No. I think that at the end of the movie, they made a very explicit decision to go, look, the choices that the narrator and Tyler Durden made had an effect on the civilization, and now buildings are crumbling. I don't think that they would have gone with that sort of imagery if it was all supposed to have taken place in a psych ward. That's such a fucking bullshit way to view things. It's so fucking postmodern. I hate it.
Well, I knew you would like have a disagreement, but it's very vehement. Now, here's the thing, though. Now, considering how otherwise well crafted and highly intelligent, with a lot of attention to detail, like very minute details, like those little like safety brochures in the back of the airplane seats. Like, here's all the things you need to do with these smiling, happy
Calm
people.
as Hindu cows.
Yeah, and they've got all these bovine supplicant faces while having an airplane crash at 600 miles an hour. I remember there's this little blink and you'll miss it scene later in the movie where one of the Project Mayhem operatives is replacing those with what, a more realistic artistic representation of like
There's-
people screaming in
actually-
terror.
One of those like little pictographs. It shows a father with the oxygen mask on himself as he's like shoving his hand into his child's face as he like looks away. Like, it's so funny. Like, that was just a little like incredibly funny bit about the film.
Yeah, like what would you really do in this situation?
Ah, fuck you, Timothy! Ah!
Yeah, and it's not as simple as like the "oh, it was all a dream" cop out bullshit scene, because everything about this movie, up to and including all these little minute details, is so accurate, except when it gets to the part where, as you described before, he puts the gun in his mouth, fires but misses. It doesn't go through his brain, but it blows out of his cheek instead, but doesn't kill him. But he's still kind of fucked up from the shot. Now, with a movie with this much attention to detail, I can tell you right now, knowing a thing or two about ballistics, that caliber of handgun, if you put it in your mouth and closed your mouth around the barrel, even if the bullet just went through your cheek, the muzzle blast energy would be more than sufficient to blow your jaw clean off like a Mortal Kombat fatality.
Okay, so what you're saying is that, like, depending on the caliber of bullet that he used, like maybe it would have done more or less damage. I mean, I mean, what caliber of bullet do you think he used? Do you think it was a 9mm? Like, what are we talking?
Well, that was a standard issue police handgun, so it was at least 40 Smith & Wesson or a 9mm.
Okay. I mean,
which would have more than enough blast if you closed your mouth. Do you realize that a firecracker, which has like 1/8 of gunpowder of a 9mm bullet, if you close your hand around it, will blow every single finger off of your hand?
well, actually, they did a slow mo of him, like shooting himself in the cheek with it, and you can see that his cheeks like expand rapidly. However, it also looks as though gas is released not only from like his lips that are around the gun, like they expel some gas, but also from the side of the mouth where like there's now a gigantic hole. It seems as though that's where the gas is expanded from.
And he is rather physically fucked up. He's like, I'm okay.
I mean, that would probably fuck you up a little bit, you know, like you're gonna have to sleep that one off at least.
To say the least. Now, yeah, because it was like a standard issue police handgun, I kind of hope that someone like Mythbusters or one of those YouTube channels does a thing like, would you be able to survive this without getting your jaw blown off? Now, I can tell you if that was like a Desert Eagle or something, yeah, your jaw's getting blown off. But 9mm, 40 Smith & Wesson, like you said, we could see like the gases escaping, and his mouth isn't, his lips aren't 100% closed around it either, because you can see that blast of gas come out of his mouth. So, it's not a tight seal.
See, I was thinking about exactly this. I was like, okay, how is it that he's able to talk? How is it that he can actually like speak after this? And what I would assume is that the bullet did not hit his jawbone, because if the bullet hit his jawbone, like he wouldn't be dead.
He'd be hanging off sideways like a zombie from Evil Dead.
Yeah, like he wouldn't be dead, but there's no way that he could speak. So what I'm like, the only thing that I can imagine is that it actually like he missed and it just went directly through like his cheek, and it's actually like kind of a flesh wound.
Yeah. Unlike probably most of the people watching this, I've actually seen like anatomy and fucked up human bodies like post accident for like paramedic training level shit. And yeah, I've seen a lot of shit that putting a gun in your mouth and pulling the trigger can do. And I've seen a lot of freaking jaws blown off. But some of those are probably shotguns, keep in mind. So,
well, I think that unless you have anything else to say, we can leave the analysis of Fight Club at that. I fundamentally think that it is it's an Ann Prim movie, Anarcho-Primitivism. I think that's what it is. Breaker, it's possible that you disagree with me. Other people that might be listening to this, it's possible that you disagree with me. I'll tell you what. If anyone wants to disagree with me and have it out and like have like a little fight about it, hey, you're welcome on the next episode, and we can hash it out. That would be great. Otherwise, if you liked what we were talking about and maybe want us to continue discussing movies in the future, hit the like and subscribe button. And otherwise, I guess that can more or less be the end of things. So that's me peacing out. Breaker.
Every like and subscription is a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy. But I think I'm coming around to your perspective on this, and this movie is a lot more honest and forthright with its messaging than what I was originally wanting to think, because like you said, this is like a 1995-99 movie, so like this whole subversion and postmodern angle hadn't really come into storytelling as much as it is in the modern day. So I'm probably judging this movie through an incorrect lens. So I think you're more right on this than my analysis was.
All right. Well, with that, peace out, everyone, and have a good day. Peace.